It's 6 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. You are watching NDTV 24/7. I'm Parmeshwar Bava. Well, this morning we woke up to a moment of glory, a moment of pride and relief. After 286 days in space, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore finally emerged from the Dragon spacecraft, smiling and waving after spending about 17 hours hurtling through space in a tiny spacecraft. The astronauts are finally home. They touched solid ground early this morning, and experts say that splashdown was absolutely spectacular. As we've been covering extensively, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore arrived at the International Space Station last year on the 6th of June, intending to stay long enough to evaluate Starliner's docking and also the operational capabilities during its first crewed flight, and also return home no more than 10 days later. But a series of technical issues and safety fears led NASA and Boeing to send the capsule back to Earth, empty in September, and extend the pair's stay by making them crew members on board the space station in place of two other astronauts still on the ground who were reassigned to other future missions. But Sunita Williams is back home as the American astronaut with the second longest combined time in space, 608 days over 3 visits to the space station, the first being in 2006. Just a little context for you here. Only Peggy Whitson, who's a former chief of NASA's astronaut office, has more with 675 days over 4 space flights. Our in-house experts on all things space, Pallav Bagla, has been tracking all the latest developments for us. He's been looking out for all the tiny things that have been happening over this 9-month journey. Pallav sir, describe what this moment was like for you this morning.
It was a routine moment in our coverage. We cover the goings and space missions on a regular basis. But it was a moment of happiness because the world seemed very anxious that 2 astronauts, so-called stranded, abandoned, lost in space, they are finally back. I never considered them abandoned, lost, or stranded in space. They are professional astronauts. They did their job. They are back on Earth. And if you saw, when Sunita Williams emerged from the Crew Dragon after a 17-hour journey in space, she waved, she smiled. There was all smiles. She's still not back on solid Earth. She's still in the vessel in the ocean of the Gulf of America, as President Trump has renamed Gulf of Mexico. She's undergoing medical checkups. And I was told by, as I heard in the NASA post-launch press conference, that for the next 2 days she would be with the medical crew, and then she would join back with her family, and then they would get much wanted time off. And I'm sure, as she told me last time when I spoke to her, she would be looking forward to having her samosas back on Earth. On this visit, she did not get samosa. She only got fish curry, her favorite food, but no samosas. So back on Earth, hoping to get fresh air on the beach with her family and her favorite dogs, and also get back to some samosas. She carried Lord Ganesh as her lucky charm, and it seems to have worked for her.
Well, indeed, sir. In fact, for further clarity on the broadcast this morning, we also have with us Ravi Margasaham and Alice, who's a space communicator, joining us on NDTV. Thank you so much for making time for us. Ravi, sir, to you first. After this splashdown, Sunita Williams and the crew, we understand, are undergoing initial medical checks and assessments, as Pallav sir has highlighted as well. Can you take our viewers through how detailed and comprehensive these checks are, and what technology is actually used to assess the astronauts' condition when they return home from long-term space travel?
One thing I want to make it clear is that, this is just a routine check on the ground. But, in space also, we are continuously monitoring these astronauts through telemedicine. And we have many devices on the International Space Station, which really look at, muscle loss and, weight loss and stuff like that, issues with sleep deprivation, also radiation exposure, how much they get, and also their extended time in microgravity, which makes them having issues with their body and other things. So all these things are checked continuously 24/7, because every day they have to do a routine exercise for almost 2 hours. And right after the exercise, we do take care of all the physical checks on the body, and all the equipment and everything, is already part of Houston, as well as some equipment is left on the International Space Station. So now the ground checks are more for seeing what has happened since they left the ISS. That's about it, really. Well, long duration space experiments will be done a little bit later, but they've been getting done continuously as they were there in space. So as Pallava mentioned, there was no issues with getting stuck or getting stranded. They were in good hands. Maybe she didn't get her samosas, but other than that, she was in very good hands, I'll tell you. Much better than 5-star hotel.
Well, indeed, we can tell she's back home safe and sound after 9 long months in space. Alice, with Sunita Williams now holding the second longest combined time in space for an American astronaut, tell us how significant this is, how significant an achievement this is in the context of space exploration history.
It's a huge significant thing to see. She's one of only 100 women that have been to space across the world. And the fact that she's now holding the second longest time in space, only to another woman, is an incredible achievement. She's done so much in the last 9 months. I don't think we can underestimate just how valuable both the mission was when she went up with Boeing. I mean, she was selected for her incredible background when it came as a naval aviator, having worked on multiple different spacecraft as well as aircraft on the ground as well. She's come on to test what the Starliner's capability was, and as much as it wasn't ready for them to take them back to the ground, she's then gone on to do a lot of experiments on the ISS and multiple spacewalks. So she's really going to cement herself as part of history.
Indeed. In fact, I must also inform our viewers that our in-house expert, Pallav sir, has actually had the good fortune to speak to Sunita Williams at length. Pallav sir, I understand that you've had quite an extensive chat with Sunita Williams back in the day where she described that she loves samosas. Tell us more about how that worked out and what she was like.
Oh, I have had many interactions with her. I have also interacted with her while she was in space on this 286-day mission.
Incredible.
We've been in touch with her and constantly in touch. But the last time she visited India, we had a long interaction. It was a long interview. We should actually play back those clips of the interview, which is a legendary interview with now the legendary daughter of India when she went into space. And she told me many, many things. And one of the things we had discussed about was how difficult it is to go on a mission where the NASA is deciding on the lowest bid business, the L1 business, to go into space. And Dr. Ravi can add more. But now they are going on a commercial mission, and I was very anxious what would happen on a commercial mission and whether the private sector would cut corners. And many would say what happened with Boeing Starliner maybe just panned out there. But she also told me some very lovely things where she discussed and told me about the message she gave for Indian women as to how they should get onto the start line if they have to become astronauts. There is no other way. And she told me that she loves samosas and she carries samosas to space, and that on the next mission she would be carrying Lord Ganesh with her. And here you can see that legendary interview with Sunita Williams, which happened at the US Embassy. And you can see she was smiling then and she's smiling now. She's a professional astronaut who does her job with great aplomb.
I think you couldn't have put it better. Ravi sir, now with astronauts like Sunita Williams pushing the boundaries of space exploration, what advancements in spacecraft design or astronaut healthcare are being developed to actually help mitigate the physical as well as the mental aspects and the effects of prolonged space missions, especially with the upcoming Mars exploration plans?
Yeah, very good question. Really, we are very interested in understanding the long-term effects of human travel in space or exploration in space. And for that, like we earlier talked about, we have a human research facility where we have clinical ultrasound and accelerometers and on-orbit mass and other devices for blood pressure, heart function, things like that. Also, we do consider the effects of long-term space travel in terms of looking at, the blood samples. We have a centrifuge in space. We also investigate the effect on neuroscience and cardiovascular systems, bone loss, bone muscle mass with not only dosimeter for measuring radiation, but also DEXA scan for measuring the bone losses. So there is another aspect of this whole thing is the loneliness. And more importantly, I think the long duration space has a little bit more difficult when we start talking about, we are far away, we can't get to them, there's issues with medicine, and also we cannot reach them or bring them back safely in case of a 9-month travel to Mars. So even Moon is like 240,000 miles away, and we are only about 220 miles in the low Earth orbit. So that is going to create a little bit more challenge because just the physical contact with them, and so we may have a moon base which can quickly run over to Mars, but still we are talking about 9 months. There is also issues of microbes, dust problems on Mars, things like that. So every time you go farther and farther in exploration, there is going to be different challenges, which we haven't anticipated. And this was even in this case, we did know that she was in ISS, and yes, she couldn't come back, but we knew how to handle it because we were in a low Earth orbit. We could supply the foods, supply the medicine, supply all the care they needed, including sending extra astronauts in case of emergency, or bringing her back on either Soyuz or a space shuttle in the past, or now SpaceX. So basically, we had a mechanism to get access to them, which will be a big problem as we go farther and farther away. But I think, as I said, these are daring people. We dare mighty things. We take risks. We know what risks are, and we do things with safety. Yes, space exploration is very, very unforgiving. Like in baseball, we say 3 strikes, you're out. But in space, you have 1 strike and you're out. So really, we are really worried about their health and well-being, because otherwise we don't have a long-duration space exploration.
Of course. In fact, just to talk about the show that was put up this morning when we finally had Sunita Williams, Butch Wilmore touch down. Pallav sir, as we saw, the Dolphins put up quite a show this morning, and we are given to understand that Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore will be reuniting with their families in about 48 hours?
That is true. SpaceX put out drone footage, and there were dolphins circling the Crew Dragon Freedom as it splashed down in the Gulf of America. Remember now, President Donald Trump has renamed Gulf of Mexico as Gulf of America. So in the Gulf of America, dolphins welcomed astronaut Sunita Williams, astronaut Butch Wilmore, Nick Hague, and cosmonaut Gorbunov, Aleksandr Gorbunov, into the ocean as they landed. A rare sight to see dolphins circling around the space capsule, and SpaceX actually put out drone footage for that. So a very welcome sign. All the anxiety which had been thrown up by people, I think the dolphins welcomed them very well home. And NASA has announced that they are right now being taken care of by medical teams. We saw she was assisted, which is normal, because when you come back from microgravity into gravity conditions, one needs assistance to stand up. But Butch Wilmore did stand up as he exited the SpaceX Crew Dragon and went into the medical quarters on board the ship. So they would be back in Houston soon, and then they would head to the astronaut quarters and then meet with their families. And subsequently, a debrief and extended rehabilitation would happen, and then they would be free for their vacation and time off. Well-earned time off for astronaut Sunita Williams. Uncertainty was the key thing in this mission. 8 days extended to 8 weeks to 8 months, unprecedented extensions, but not the longest space mission in the world. Longest space flights, there are others who have done it. America's Peggy Whitson, the commander for the Axiom 4 mission, holds the record for the longest number of days in space, and the Russian cosmonaut holds the record for longest number of days, 437 in space. Astronaut Sunita Williams spent 286 days, which is a long trip. But yes, it was the unpredictability which was making people very anxious. She worked professionally at the International Space Station. When she went up there, it was a routine, not a routine flight, but a flight in which she was to, on a maiden flight of the Boeing Starliner, she was testing that particular vehicle out. She's a Navy test pilot. And then there were glitches with the Boeing Starliner. The Boeing Starliner came back empty, but it landed very safely on its own. And from there, Sunita Williams became the commander of the International Space Station, a rare honor for a person who goes to the space station.
Absolutely.
And she handed that over, and she's back on Earth on the Crew-X Space Dragon.
Yes.
And
in fact,
first time we have seen, she created history by going up on a different spacecraft and coming down on a different spacecraft. So several, including longest hours of spacewalks, are now under the belt of astronaut Sunita Williams.